Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Attorney Henry Gornbein. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome back as my guest, Judith Cunningham, who was my guest in one of my earliest shows in September of 2018 when we talked about her aging parents and some of the issues she was facing. So here we are almost 2.5 years later, and we'd like to know what's going on. So, and first of all, for our viewers, please watch this video, go to the Gracefully Graying YouTube channel, and also like us and watch our Gracefully Graying site. Judy, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you, Henry. It's very kind of you to invite me back.
Well, you're always a pleasure to have as a guest. In your many roles over the years as the Oakland County counsel, the attorney, Brooks Patterson's right hand or left hand or whatever, and now as someone who is caring for aging parents. Judy, tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and your background, first of all.
Well, as you mentioned, I am an attorney. Prior to being an attorney, I was a teacher. I taught community college. My dad, who is now 99 years old, talked me into going to law school. So I went to law school. I was a single mother in law school, and I was a single mother when I started and when I finished. So that was not an easy slog, but I eventually got a job with the circuit court, and the chief judge wanted me to stay with the circuit court. So I went through court administration. I was the deputy court administrator and then court administrator, counsel to the court. And then, as you mentioned, Brooks Patterson asked me to come over and be counsel to the county. So I did that for the remainder of my career with Oakland County. And I retired from the county 7.5 years ago.
How did you become involved with your parents?
Well, it started out gradually, I guess you would say. I realized that as they were aging, and I mentioned my dad's 99, my mother is now 95. I was concerned that if they had a medical emergency or anything, my siblings and I, none of us knew like what medications they were on. So I just started asking them for, just in case there's an emergency, can I keep track of your prescription so that if I have to share any medical information, my mother was quite willing to do that. My dad didn't want to give me any information. Now, he was a dentist. He had practiced dentistry for over 40 years, but it was like pulling teeth, no pun intended, to get him to give me his medical information. And I soon realized with that he was making his own lists. She was making her own lists. It was like 2 years into this process that I realized they were both taking the same medication for high blood pressure or something. And they had both spelled it so badly on their respective lists that I didn't even realize it was the same medication until I started going through the formularies and whatnot, the drug companies. I said, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So it started out very innocently. I just wanted to be ready if there was an emergency. And then it got even more gradual in the financial part of it. My dad forgot to make one of his estimated tax payments one day for one of the, you have to make 3 or 4 a year. And he forgot one, and he came over to my house in a panic. I forgot to pay my estimated tax. I said, okay, we'll take care of it. Well, I write a letter to the IRS. I'll throw ourselves on the mercy of the IRS. I'll remind them that you were in World War II and you served as a dentist in the Navy. And I wrote this real persuasive letter and asked that they waive any fees and consider his age and blah, blah. So anyway, it was just gradual. It was one thing after another until about 3 years ago.
I remember about 3 years ago, your dad had to stop driving, and I think that was a major issue. Tell us about that.
Well, he had a heart attack first.
Okay.
He had a heart attack in March of 2018. And at that time, my parents had 3 homes. They had the one up here in Michigan on Elizabeth Lake, a very big house. And then they have they still have two homes in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So he had a heart attack when they were down in the islands and had to be airlifted back to the States. And I had to go to Fort Lauderdale to Florida. They brought him to Florida, and I went down there and stayed for a week until he was well enough to come back. My mother was there with him too, of course. But there was no way he was going to be able to drive after this heart attack. So he did not want to hear from me. When he told me he wanted to start driving again, and when he was like in physical therapy after the heart attack, I said, Dad, you really can't drive. You haven't driven for 6 months now. You cannot drive. And he's, whoa, that's pretty harsh, And I was taking him to physical therapy at the time. So then shortly after that, we went to his cardiologist, and I took the cardiologist aside. I said, listen to me. I need you to tell him he can't drive, because he doesn't want to hear it from me, and he thinks he can drive again. Well, just true story. So when the three of us were together again, I brought it up kind of on the sly, and the doctor looks at my dad and he goes, Harry, his name's Harry. He says, Harry, you think you can drive? He said, there's no way you can drive. And my dad goes, oh, okay. And I'm like, why was it so, with me, it was, whoa, that's pretty harsh. I'm going to be able to drive again. So I guess they just don't want to hear it from their kids, even when, as you know, I'm not a kid. I mean, I'm on Social Security and Medicare and all that too,
For a parent, you're always a kid. That's
the reality. I guess so.
And you talked about medical issues. Your father had a heart attack. Have there been any other medical issues that you've been dealing with since 2018 with either of your parents? Well,
he had to have heart surgery. He had to have a valve replacement surgery. It's the acronym is TAVR. I can't remember all what it stands for, but it's a valve replacement. And then a year later, my mother fractured her hip. After his heart surgery and his heart attack, they were still living at their principal residence on Elizabeth Lake in Waterford. But after she fractured her hip, it was game over. There was no way they could stay at the house. And I have to tell you, and your listeners may find this useful, helpful. My sister and I had filled out paperwork for a assisted living residence, because we knew that eventually our parents were going to have to go to assisted living. We just didn't know when this was going to happen. And there was a year-long waiting list to get an apartment at this assisted living place. It's through Lourdes out in Waterford on Watkins Lake. But as a matter of fact, my grandparents had all been there 30 years before my folks. So my sister and I filled out all the paperwork. And 2 weeks before my mother fractured her hip, we had turned it in and been told there was like a year-long wait. So after my mother fractured her hip, it was determined that we thought she was going to have surgery. She didn't have to have surgery, but she had to have physical therapy. So they sent her to Lourdes physical therapy. And she was there for a week 2 weeks with physical therapy. And because she was already considered one of their residents, we were able to get an apartment for them without waiting the year that we had been told we would be on this waiting list for.
That's amazing.
Well, it was, and we had looked at a couple of other assisted living places too, but this one we had filled out the paperwork for. We thought it was the best of the ones we had looked at. And so we lucked out in getting able to get them an appointment, and get them an apartment, excuse me. And so we had to move them into assisted living in May of 2019, just a year after his heart attack.
How's that working out? Are they happy there?
Well, it's pretty amazing that they are doing as well as they are. It's a wonderful place. It's Mendelssohn Home is the assisted living place. They are in a 1-bedroom apartment. They had a great big house on the lake with 2 kitchens, 2 floor, walk out to the lake. I mean, they had a huge home on the lake. And now but they seem to have adjusted very well. Actually, my sister and I had both determined that our mother would thrive there with all the social stuff that they do. Now, of course, that has been substantially limited because of the pandemic and everything. But they're doing, like I said, 95 and 99. I don't have any friends that have both of their parents still living at these ages. Like people I went to high school with, none of my friends have both their parents. A few of them have one, but.
Well, you got some amazing genetic components there. What about involvement of family members? I know that was difficult at times.
It is hard. Well, my siblings and I started having occasional as needed family meetings, so that the four of us would be singing out of the same hymnal, so to speak. But I have power of attorney. And even though I am not the oldest sibling, I felt it was my responsibility as power of attorney. And the fact that I have led large organizations, 400 people in the court and so on, I took it upon myself to create agendas for these meetings and also to write up notes after each one. So we had a record. I mean, when you are making all these arrangements, medical, financial, residential, insurance, it's the whole gamut of, daily living plus the added stuff of older people, with the Medicare and the Social Security and the whole 9 yards. Anyway, I would create agendas for these meetings and I would write up the notes from the meetings so that there was a record and we knew exactly who was going to be doing what. The medical stuff has been very much, a lot of that effort has been eliminated now that mom and dad are in assisted living because the medical information is all kept there.
Have you helped them deal with Medicare? Because that's an annual.
Oh, yeah. Medicare, Social Security, just getting addresses changed on that stuff is an effort. I had to have I get all their mail at my home now, after they moved out of their house up here. But I get all of their mail. I take care of all of that. Plus, I have the 2 homes in the islands that I'm taking care of too. Those homes are for sale, but we can't even go down there this winter because of the pandemic and the travel restrictions and whatnot.
Didn't your son go down there?
What's that?
Didn't your son go down there?
Oh yeah, my son. my son. Yeah, well, I always went when he did. Yeah, we all went together. Yeah. My son was running for election when I was with you last time, and as you know, he is now a circuit court judge.
Right. What about financial issues? You have power of attorney. What are some of the other financial issues that you and your siblings are helping your parents with?
Well, their investments. Here's something that came up as a complete surprise to me. So I'm down in the islands last winter with my sister, and and we had just sold the house up here, and I had told her I couldn't close on it till I came back in early March, came back home. So she's working with the title company, and I get an email from the title company that says, this house is in your mother's trust, so we need the trust documents. And I'm going, the house is in my mother's trust. I don't know anything about this. I have decided that at times I am a hunter and gatherer of documents. And I call myself the hunter and gatherer. I am hunting, for certain legal things I had to do with the lawyers down in the islands, I had to find a copy of my mother and dad's marriage certificate from 1946.
Wow.
So, I'm always I'm hunter and gatherer of their documents. But like with the financials, my mother, one parent has an account at Bank of America, the other parent had an account at Chase. To get the power of attorney in place at one of those 2 banks required 5 trips to the bank. 5 trips to the bank. And they did it wrong. And I was so irate that I said, I really believe that that you have a security problem here, that you have a fiduciary duty problem here to to your customer, my dad. And I mean, it is not easy. Just trying to file power of attorney for Social Security and Medicare. You have to go through all these hoops. It is amazing. It is not easy. And here's the other thing, Henry. I'm an attorney, and before that, I was a college English instructor. So I have I know how to write and I know how to articulate and whatnot. I feel very sorry for people that do not have, the educational level that I have been able to have. This would be even more difficult if I didn't have some of the skills that I have acquired.
Now, you've got the 2 homes in Turks and Caicos on the market. Is that going to be difficult because you're dealing with islands and international issues as well once it sells, or is everything in place so that if a buyer comes along, everything's good to go?
Well, it's good to go now because I have spent hours and hours and hours, and we have an attorney down there who has been very helpful. I had to get the power of attorney on those documents too. And, I'm a lawyer up here, and I've never been an estate lawyer, and I've been a municipal lawyer, contracts, that kind of thing, but I am not an estate lawyer. I work with an attorney down there. I work with a real estate agent down there. I work with a bank down there. I work with our caretaker down there, the electric company. I pay the electric bills for the 2 houses down there. It is a whole nother layer of effort that most people don't have that. But I guess if I were to make any suggestions to people, to the extent, if you have elderly parents and they will sit down and talk to you about these things, it is best to have information shared. For example, when I realized how difficult my parents were about sharing their medical, just their prescriptions, that's all I wanted to know. What medications are you on in case there's an emergency? I give my children, my daughter's a teacher, my son is a judge, and my sister, these are my medications if I have an emergency, and I update it once a year and I give it to them. I don't think there's anything, that just makes sense. With respect to financial issues, when I found out my mother's house, my parents' house up here was in a trust, I had to go through all these machinations with the lawyer up here, with their estate lawyer up here, and get a certificate of trust. And I didn't have this information. I didn't know this stuff.
That's interesting, Judy. To go as an aside, we just published something called Listing Life Fully, which is available on the Gracefully Graying store, our website. And what it is, it's a 58 or 60 page booklet for listing every areas of someone's lives. There's an area for listing all of your bank accounts, all of your investments, another one for listing all of your expenses, your checkbook, where everything is. Another is for every legal document, wills, powers of attorney. Another is for listing all your meds, who your doctors are, go-to people as far as friends. If there are cognitive issues, your favorite things with regard to colors, food. So it's all there in one booklet. So what you're saying is really how important it is for those of us who are gracefully graying, or especially those of us who have aging parents, to list things.
Well, to make a list of all of these kinds of things, or to have that list available through your Gracefully Graying site is such a wonderful idea. And I have put together, I just haven't finalized it yet, but what I've done for my siblings, in case something happens to me, I have put together a list of, I've got it in a draft form, of all of the financials, the legals, because I have lawyers up here I deal with, lawyers in the islands, the investments, the banks, the contacts at the various insurance places I deal with, Medicare numbers and Social Security phone numbers, their cards, copies of their, I keep copies of their license, my parents' license plates, not that they can drive anymore, but just so identification pieces and all that. And I'm going to share that with my 3 siblings so that if something happens to me, they will know, they will have information altogether that I did not have when I started taking over this effort.
Judy, over the years in my career, I had some estates, and I've had cases where siblings couldn't agree on whether it was day or night. And it's like I've had other situations where one sibling wanted placement in an assisted living facility close to one sibling, and another one wanted it in another part of the state. And they agree to disagree, or the same dynamics that are in most families. Dysfunction rears its ugly head often when you're trying to deal with aging parents. Do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Well, I have had the same experience talking to people like you indicate. I would say that on most matters, we eventually, I have 2 sisters and 1 brother. And on most issues, we eventually come to a common, for example, we had to do an estate sale at my folks' house. My folks I don't think they had gotten rid of anything since 1947. And I am not exaggerating. They lived in the same house for over 63 years, but they brought a bunch of stuff with them from Detroit when they moved out to the lake from Detroit. So we all worked on the estate sale very well. I mean, we eventually get to agreement. You know, should we have a company come in and do it? Should we do it ourselves? Blah, blah, blah. All of these things. I think, Henry, people like you and me who are lawyers and have some negotiation skills, that is helpful. And obviously not every family has a lawyer, but, and then sometimes if you're the lawyer, you know, people, sometimes a sibling can be mistrustful of you being the lawyer, that you have an inside scoop on things or something. I don't know. But that's why, like I said, when we have these meetings, I make an agenda, I take notes. And I always say when I send out the notes, if I have misstated or misunderstood or left out anything from these notes from our meeting, please feel free to jump in. That's how I dealt with my clients at the county. This is my understanding. If you have a different one, you know, speak now. No one has ever commented that I missed something or got it wrong or whatever. I think that obviously that is an issue for all families, that we're all not going to agree, and everybody's got strong personalities and whatnot. I think the best advice I can give is to have a good sharing of information. But it also starts with, since your clientele is gracefully graying, or, you know, we are of an age, we need to share our information with our kids so that it is easy for them when something happens to us. If my parents thought that when they had a trust, they had an estate plan, end of story. No, that's not the end of the story. They had a house full of stuff from 1940, what did I say, 46 or 49, whatever, before I was born. And, who's supposed to have all the stuff? Is there certain stuff you want to go to a certain great grandchild? You know, parents, you know, as we get older, we need to make our wishes known, and we have a responsibility, I think, to the next generation to make it easy or easier for them when we need to be taken care of, because the time will come, you know.
It's true. And one of the things, I think it's hard for parents to talk about certain things. I mean, money, your needs, these are difficult issues, and it's hard because there's a dynamic where, you know, we're the parent and we're also the child, and parents, especially aging parents, tend to look at children, even children in their 60s and 70s, as children. So it's difficult.
Let me give you an example. Cleaning out my parents' home, and I cleaned the office, which that's where all these old documents were. Again, I'm the hunter and gatherer. But I found, first of all, I found a couple of eulogies that I had written over the years. One for my grandpa, one for my uncle, and actually 2 uncles. So so that was kind of a nice thing to find, and I, share with, who remembers these things? Actually, just 2 weeks ago, I gave the eulogy of my grandpa to my granddaughters. I said, this was your great great grandpa who came over on the boat from Armenia. And they were so happy to get this. And, I read it to them, and my older granddaughter, she's almost 11, she wanted a copy of it. So that was nice. But the thing I was going to say is my one uncle who never had children, he had arranged everything. He had, even for his death, he had arranged everything. He had arranged his cemetery, what he wanted with that. He had made everything so easy for my mother, who ended up being his the executor of his estate. It wasn't difficult for her because he had laid everything out. He had taken care of his own stuff. And I think that we need to, those of us who are parents and our children are gonna have to take care of our stuff. We need to make it easy for them. I am purging stuff out of my house left and right. Well, particularly during this pandemic, because I'm stuck at home. I can get rid of all these papers and things, but this is a great opportunity to, get rid of your stuff so your kids don't have to deal with it.
It's important. We have less than a minute. What are some final thoughts and words of wisdom you'd like to give to our viewers? And one thing I want to comment on is the fact that we don't know what tomorrow may bring. And I think hopefully we are all going to live many, many more years. But I think, especially in sharing things with our children, it's important to have everything in order so that if something happens, they're not everyone's surprised, everyone's shocked, but at least if our financial and legal affairs and everything's in a safe place where you know where it is, it helps a lot. So some final thoughts for our viewers.
Well, my final thoughts are, as you get older, think about how you're not likely, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to stay in your principal residence forever. My parents left 3 homes, none of them on their own volition. They ended up leaving 3 homes after health emergencies, basically. And so that left us to have to take care of the furnishings, all of the stuff in 3 homes to take care of. We're all going to have to leave eventually. I live in a 3-story house. I don't need this 3-story house for the rest of my life, and I probably shouldn't be in a 3-story house. But at some point, I need to make my own plan about when I'm going to leave my house, and I want it to be on my terms. And I would advise, gracefully grained people to think about that, to not leave that decision to an emergency situation or whatever for their children too.
Judy, we're out of time.
Okay.
I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying. And again, please go to our YouTube channel to watch this important interview with Judy Cunningham, as well as all the others. And please like and go to gracefullygraying.com and share with us. Thank you.